Frustrations are mounting at Baltimore Ravens training camp after sloppiness continues. We talk about that. Lamar Jackson, John Harbaugh, he didn't hold back on how great he feels Lamar is. We talk about that and all Ravens updates next on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome into the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here on this Purple Friday, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day, your first listen each and every single day. We're free and available for you on all podcasting platforms, including in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel, and in audio form, where you can follow along and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We're a 5-day-a-week Ravens show. So Monday through Friday, we have you covered with daily Ravens updates. We also sometimes have bonus episodes on the weekends. We also go live after every single Ravens game and every single piece of Ravens big news. And thank you out there to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners. If you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. It is August. Happy August. Happy football month. We get some Ravens preseason football this month. I'm pumped for that. The Hall of Fame game was yesterday. It obviously brings back memories of Lamar Jackson's rookie season back in 2018 when he played in the Hall of Fame game. But here to talk about all Ravens with me today is Nikhil Mehta of Russell Street Report. He is boots on the ground at Ravens training camp. He's providing you great updates on this Baltimore Ravens squad. Nikhil, I'm glad to have you back on the show. We actually literally 5 minutes ago got word that Terry McLaurin requested a trade. So, hey, the Ravens apparently getting, no, I'm just kidding. The Ravens are not getting the Terry McLaurin. We'll talk about maybe another more realistic move coming up a little bit later in the show. But Nikhil, how's training camp been so far for you, and how's everything looked?
Training camp has been great. I think one thing I notice, this is my 4th year at training camp. And so every year you have better feel for what they're doing. And this year, I think I've just been keeping closer track of the little things that they're doing. When they're working on really specific things in their drills, a day like today where they actually didn't have the fans there because of the inclement weather, you're actually able to get pretty close to the field and hear more of what the coaches are saying and just have a better understanding of what's happening in each portion of the practice, which is really important when you're trying to evaluate how people did, because it's important to know what their goals are in order to figure out if they accomplish them. So sometimes you might see something in practice and see, someone really struggling or someone really doing well in something, but you actually have to know the intent of what the drill or that portion of practice is to help. And so, one thing that the Ravens have been, very, very intentional about is getting plays started. They use a pretty complicated system. They move in a lot of personnel, a lot of different formations. And so that's really execution. Start of play execution has really been an emphasis so far in training camp.
Yeah, I think JJ Watt, essentially, he put on Twitter, I think maybe it was last week, that exact sentiment of you really have to understand the technicality of what a drill is for. Just because a guy maybe has a rough day, maybe they were trying to practice something and try something new. And I think we'll talk about the kicker competition a little bit later and how that's looked. But, for example, Tyler Loop and John Hoyland, the coaching staff is working with them, trying to get technicalities down. I'm not going to read too much one way or the other about that until we get to the regular season. That I think is when, or maybe even the preseason, that I think is where we can kind of take a little bit more away. But Nikhil, training camp is in full swing. The Ravens, they started pads this week. Obviously, I don't believe they were in pads yesterday, correct? On Thursday, no pads on Thursday?
They were in shells today, or
shells.
On Thursday.
Okay,
yes.
Great. So things have been moving at a fast pace, and the Ravens are trying to get everything down before the regular season. I know that, Nikhil, the Ravens, one thing that they've been emphasizing is trying to cut down on those pre-snap penalties, something that plagued them last season. Just for some overall context, just a little bit in terms of where the Ravens ranked last season in terms of penalties. They were, in terms of net penalties, they were worse than the NFL, -35 in that category in terms of how many penalties were called against them. They were also last in the league at 140. So, the Ravens, factoring everything in, they were a bottom of the league team in a lot of different metrics, maybe not last in every category, but towards the bottom 5 in a decent amount of them. And the practice on Thursday, it seemed like there was some more frustration about that. It's something the coaches have been emphasizing. We have heard that in the interviews that the coaches have given. Nikhil, you've obviously been there and seen it. Apparently, there were false starts, more pre-snap penalties. Todd Monken mentioned there were a high number again. Frustrations in that department seem to be mounting. What have you kind of taken away so far? As you mentioned, it's early in training camp, you're trying to get everything right, but the Ravens hopefully will be able to get that number down sooner rather than later, but it doesn't seem to be happening so far.
Yeah, Todd Monken told us that there were 7 false starts or overall pre-snap penalties committed today. I will say I don't particularly notice one or two players being responsible for a lot of them, which is good and bad, right? It's good that there aren't players who are just completely behind the ball and not sure about the system. It's also not good that like every day there seems to be someone different who's committing a false start. Like you said, it's early in training camp, and Todd Monken was actually really forthcoming about the false starts when asked about this. I believe it was last Thursday or Saturday or something like that. Not this past Thursday, but the last time that we talked to him. He actually was preaching a lot of patience with it. He was saying that he's the king of overreacting, but that it's he really, really wants his offense to get the details down right. And when they are rotating in left guards, because there is the left guard competition going on, when they are rotating in, the 5 different eligible receivers they have from one play to another, that sometimes can change entirely. They take 5 guys on and they take 5 guys off and put 5 different ones on. And Monken wants everyone on the roster, down to the practice squad guys, to know this offense inside and out. And so I think he is confident that they will get to where they want to go. But yeah, I mean, certainly having issues with cadence, continue to have issues with cadence, it can be frustrating. It also just kind of interrupts practice. False start. Sometimes they will pull out the offensive lineman or player who committed the false start. Sometimes they'll have to run a lap. That's just kind of disruption to the rhythm of the offense as a whole, which same thing as it is in real life games. And so I think it's kind of a good microcosm of, okay, the pre-snap penalties are still happening and it's disrupting the rhythm of the offense, but the offense is still able to make some plays. And so, training camp is the time of overreaction. The idea that the Ravens are going to be having 4 or 5 false starts a game this season is just not very likely. It just doesn't seem like, something that Monken, quite frankly, is going to let happen. And if he is preaching patience, now he gets animated on the sidelines when his guys commit a false start, no doubt. But every time that he has been asked about it, he seems to just be preaching patience because he believes in his guys. He believes in his players, his coaches to install everything. So, you can tell there's some frustration. The defense definitely enjoys when they get the offense to commit a false start too. And I think that kind of feeds into the offense's frustration. So, I don't think there's any one reason why this is an issue. I think it is just pretty natural, especially in an offense that didn't use a ton of cadence before last year.
Right. And again, it's trying to work on things now, a couple of things. I mean, Nikhil, I know you were there. Jameson Hensley noted that after Ronnie Stanley was flagged, he threw his helmet to the ground in disgust. There were back-to-back false starts. You noted yourself that the Ravens went through a 4-play stretch towards the end of practice that included Nnamdi Madubuike batting down a ball. You got those 2 false starts, and then Madubuike tipping another pass, and apparently that was actually caught by Malaki. How impressive was that catch?
It was a really impressive play. Madubuike didn't quite bat it down at the line, but certainly got a hand out, tipped it up, and Cunningham was in the middle of the field and was probably 10 or 15 yards down the field and came running back towards the line of scrimmage and made the catch. It was probably more contact on that whole exchange than the coaches wanted to see with shells on, but it was an impressive play by him. Unfortunately, he also tipped a pass later on that resulted in a Sanusi Kane interception, and so you win 1 tip, you lose 1 tip.
Yeah, that's how it goes. And Lamar Jackson just cannot escape, I guess. Receivers tipping the ball in the air for the opposing defender. And did Lamar spike his helmet after that? Was that another source of frustration?
He's frustrated anytime a ball goes off his receiver's hands. I think the only time he doesn't get really frustrated is if Ricard drops a ball, because what are you expecting? But I think again it's also a semblance of like high standards. He has high standards and high expectations, not just for himself, because that ball was high. The ball to Cunningham was a little high. I know Lamar had to, I don't know if he had to get it over a linebacker or it was close to going over a linebacker, but he probably could have thrown a little bit of a better ball too. So, a lot of times when he's frustrated, he is the first target of his own frustration.
Right. And that's typical Lamar Jackson. I mean, he wants perfection. He's somebody who was the ultimate competitor. So obviously that's going to come out. I think it makes everybody better. He's not doing it in a demeaning way. He just truly wants everybody to be their best. And, even though the Ravens, it was shells, there was a lot of conversation. I know Jeff Rebeck at The Athletic put this out, but it was still like a full speed practice and the coaches were vocal. I mean, apparently Nikhil George Warhop was all over his guys. Ben Cleveland, you mentioned guys have to run laps to do this. He was yanked out of a drill, apparently. Leonte Wester had to run a lap after jumping early. I mean, how intense was this practice on Thursday?
I think it was not as intense, I think, as the ones that have been in pads, obviously.
Right.
For shell practice, it was pretty intense. But I think part of the thing with Warhop is, that they have a couple of young offensive linemen on this O-line that they really want to start. And they think they really do believe these guys can be good. And I think that's one of the reasons why, like Daniel Falele, for example, it was a really, really hot day. He is a very, very big human being and he was struggling, but they didn't take him out until his time to be on the field was over, until, the group he was with, until they were done their session. He didn't come off the field. But once he did, they went and checked him out. They got him hydrated. He came back for the rest of practice. But they want him to push through those moments. And so I think some of the intensity on a day without shells coming from the coaches is their reminder to kind of keep the intensity up, even though you're not wearing pads. They don't want the players to get complacent right before they have an off day.
Right. Exactly. So again, this is the type of thing. It's, I think, just normal training camp stuff. And now the new camp injury is apparently just a camp thing. So whatever that diagnosis is, the Ravens have been banged up. We'll get to that a little bit later in some senses. But coming up in the second part of the show, we're going to be diving a little bit more into Lamar Jackson. John Harbaugh had an interview with Kevin Clark, and he did not hold back on how great he believes Lamar Jackson is. We'll talk about that as well as how Lamar looks at training camp so far. We'll get Nikhil's thoughts on that and a lot more coming up on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building up your wealth. And a financial goal that I've really been meaning to get serious about, it is saving. I really want to save. I want to save more. And Monarch makes it really easy for a lot of different reasons. All my accounts and spending being in one place makes things incredibly simple and incredibly easy. Plus, having everything in one app makes it easier to manage my money on a day-to-day basis. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Back on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher and Nikhil Mehta still breaking down Ravens football with you. It is Ravens preseason football month. The Ravens have a couple of joint practices as well, which is exciting. Their stadium practice is coming up on Sunday. Things are in motion, Nikhil. It feels like truly football is back, and the timeline's full of football, though I guess yesterday it was also full of baseball trades because there were a bajillion of them. But for the Ravens, Lamar Jackson is the key to the team. He's the guy that makes all the gears turn. And for John Harbaugh, he sat down with Kevin Clark on his This Is Football podcast, the interview over on ESPN. And John Harbaugh really, I guess he got controversial because people thought it was a controversial statement he made on Lamar. Essentially, he praised Lamar for the person that he is. He said he appreciates Lamar the most as a person, the leader, the person, the genuine human that he is. But then he said from a football standpoint, he's a historically good passer. That's really quite the statement because of the narrative surrounding him. And then he went further and said, Lamar can throw the football. He can throw it every kind of way. He can make every kind of throw, any kind of way you want. He's as good as any passer that there has ever been. And I think now the numbers are proving that. So again, John Harbaugh holds his quarterback in the highest regard. Obviously, Lamar Jackson has been a historical player in so many aspects. And I think, Nikhil, the thing that still impresses me is just the year-to-year improvement where you think that, man, Lamar, even if it's not a statistical, look, if we're talking about statistical improvement, 36 touchdowns in 2019, if he improved, he'd be at 75 passing touchdowns a season at this point. But it's the efficiency, it's some of the decision-making. It's just the game slowing down for him. I don't think John Harbaugh is misguided. I don't think John Harbaugh is going out there and saying, yeah, Lamar's the greatest to ever do it now at 28 years old. But in terms of him being historical, John Harbaugh, I think, is correct, especially with what we've seen year to year and how he has gotten better and better. What are your thoughts on it?
So a couple things. One, I think there is a legitimate argument to be made that Lamar Jackson is the most talented quarterback to ever touch a football, because I'm not sure. I think what Harbaugh said, and Harbaugh's very judicious with his words. He's very careful with what he's going to say about Lamar. And he says, what I note is that he said he can make every pass, every kind of way, and obviously what he can do with his legs. And he can do these things while he's on the run. And so I think what Harbaugh is partially saying is just Lamar can do anything you need to ask a quarterback to do. Whatever you ask a quarterback to do in terms of passing the ball, which includes evading sacks, passing on the run, extended plays, Lamar's able to do that at an extremely, extremely high level and up there with any of his contemporaries. I don't think that is an especially controversial statement. I think, everyone, there's kind of two ways to look at it. One is, Harbaugh, of course, he's supposed to pump up his own quarterback. And of course, the other way is, well, yeah, he's a 2-time MVP. What do you expect? I think that sometimes as Ravens fans, I don't think we take Lamar for granted, but I think we miss kind of what you were saying before. We miss the year-to-year improvements because you're just so used to the brilliance. Last year, his command at the line of scrimmage in terms of identifying and then absolutely shredding opponents' blitzes was really, really impressive, and not something that he had really demonstrated earlier in his career, especially when the menu of things that he could check into was more limited under Greg Roman. Todd Monken really emphasized giving Lamar that freedom. And we talk a lot about Lamar's legs. We talk a lot about Lamar's arm. We don't talk about Lamar's eyes and his head. And I think those are the areas in which you're seeing the real jump from Lamar in the last year, is because of his ability to see the field. Todd Monken and T. Martin also, but they both said this after Thursday's practice, that the difference with Lamar is that he is seeing things differently. He has next level vision because the game moves so slowly for him when he's physically moving. But once he's able to slow the game down visually the way it does for him physically, that is what has really unlocked kind of this next level of play from him. Combined with Martin's coaching, Monken kind of giving him more free reins at the line of scrimmage, that's allowed Lamar to use his eyes and his brain to then put himself in the best situation of how to use his arms and legs. I don't know if I said that the perfect way, but essentially he knows how good he is. He knows what he's capable of. And when you then ask Lamar to diagnose, identify, and then call his own plays, and he's not calling all of his own plays, but he's making checks at the line of scrimmage, that is really unlocking another level of speed for a player whose game is all about speed in different ways. And so, we talk about the game slowing down for like Trenton Simpson. You want the game to slow down for him. For Lamar, it was already there, and then it's like everyone's moving in slow motion around him, and he's really, really able to identify the spaces that he can exploit. So to me, that's Harbaugh, completely has reason to back Lamar this way. You mentioned earlier the narratives about Lamar as a passer that have kind of percolated throughout his career, mainly because just because you run to some football analysts means that you cannot also pass. I've never understood, that dichotomy when you say, well, if he's a running quarterback, he's probably not good at passing because he must be running all the time for some reason. And that's just never made sense.
In terms of some of the all-time greats, I know obviously Patrick Mahomes is up there due to what he's done in his career and his Super Bowl championships. I think obviously that is the next step for Lamar, is to win a Super Bowl. And I think that's where like all-time great ring culture, the whole 9 yards comes in. But Doug Clawson, who is a writer at CBS Sports, researcher and writer, he actually had an interesting stat that he pulled up between Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes, that Lamar Jackson is actually on the verge of passing Patrick Mahomes in terms of career passer rating. They have the exact same yards per pass attempt in their career. So Lamar right now is at 102 passer rating. Mahomes is at 102.1, and they're both at 7.8 career yards per pass attempt. So it's numbers like that kind of put it into perspective for Lamar that like he is such a unique, and I agree with you in terms of like talent, not only athletically, but throwing wise. I think Lamar, there is the argument that he is the most talented player / athlete, because I think Lamar brings so much dynamic level to with his arm and like dynamic ability arm wise and leg wise. There are so many arguments you can put Lamar Jackson in. I mean, I think Lamar's getting up there too. I mean, I don't think it's like that crazy.
I think this might be a hotter take, but I think if I was starting an offense with every player in the history of the National Football League available, Lamar Jackson would be my quarterback. I would want the quarterback that can do the most things at the highest level. And I think that's what John Harbaugh is saying. He is saying that Lamar Jackson is able to do anything you could ask a quarterback of, and he's able to do it at an extremely high level. And look, I have the utmost respect for Patrick Mahomes, the guys like Brady and Manning, who I grew up watching. There's maybe no one on the planet that can run with a football the way that Lamar Jackson can run with a football. And when you include that as part of his quarterback play, which it is, and I don't just mean the read option plays, I really mean his agility and pocket management and the way that Todd Monken is able to design passing plays around Lamar Jackson's legs. That is, to me, what makes him just the most talented quarterback to ever touch a football. We can go best and greatest and rings and all that, but to me, just thinking if I'm building an offense and I have to pick one guy in the history of the game to be my quarterback, it's going to be 8.
Yeah, and I know there were arguments, especially earlier on in Lamar's career, not necessarily offensive line wise, but more so receiver wise, where it's like sometimes you get so caught up in how good Lamar has become and how good he was that, you know, maybe at times people were arguing the Ravens were saying, all right, well, Lamar Jackson can mask some of those weaknesses and, you know, he can do that, which he does. But now they have given him a roster around him, the weapons around him, offensive, like now you have everything to boost. Lamar is the ultimate elevator. Like he elevates talent. But now you also have talent that can help Lamar Jackson, a la Derrick Henry, a la you bring in Zay Flowers and Rashod Bateman, plus, you know, the depth pieces there. You draft Isaiah Likely and Charlie Cole to go along with Mark Andrews. You now have that roster around him so that not only Lamar is elevating that talent, now the stuff around Lamar is also to the point where I think it needed to get to maybe a little bit earlier on in his career. But Nikhil, in terms of Lamar, how he's looked so far at training camp and kind of what you've seen from him, you mentioned it, you know, Lamar, he's had some days of interesting days for Lamar Jackson standards. Apparently it was a little better today though. Is that right?
Yeah. You know, he's been very up and down in training camp, and that doesn't matter. Right. Lamar is going to be ready for the regular season. He is going to come in and be ready to go. I think that, you know, Todd Monken has talked about starting faster. And I think that fans like to equate, you know, Lamar Jackson not having the greatest training camp sometimes with the Ravens' tough start in the regular season. I don't think it's quite that simple. I think it also has to do with the fact that the Ravens don't like playing their starters in the preseason, etc. Anyway, Jackson can be up and down. There are some days, and it feels like there are some days where he just can't find a rhythm and doesn't do it by the end of practice. I don't want to say doesn't bother, but I do think that if Lamar Jackson wanted to lock in and hit some passes, I do think he's capable of that. So there is a little bit of a disconnect between the, you know, I'm so locked in, I'm leading these guys every day, and some of the down days that he has. Like, you know, I think yesterday and Monday in particular, or Wednesday and Monday, he in particular, he was kind of all over the place with his accuracy and could be trying things, taking certain risks on purpose. You know, like I talked about at the top, it's, you know, it's about intention with some of these practice drills. You don't always know. He did have a really nice day today, and some of the throws were just beauties. A 35-yard pinpoint perfect to Dayton Wade on a fade down the left side. The next play, he hits Wade on a deep out on the right side. Again, a perfect ball. He's throwing with a lot of anticipation. Maybe I don't think that's something that's necessarily new for him, but he's throwing with anticipation to guys like Dayton Wade and Devonte Walker. And throwing with anticipation means you have to trust a receiver to come out of their break and catch the ball. And so I think that's one kind of soft leadership skill that Lamar has, is his on-field leadership, targeting some of the younger guys and showing them that he trusts them. As far as his passing of the ball, I mean, when he wants to do it, he turns it on and he can hit every pass. You know, I mentioned the 2 he had today. He had another nice deep ball later on. On Wednesday, he had a really, really nice, a long touchdown run. Of course, the defense complained about not being able to hit him, but I'm not really sure that Malaki Starks could have caught him on that play. Overall, I just think that Jackson is looks sharp some days. Some days, even when he doesn't look great, he still makes some really good throws. And I think that's kind of the essence of Lamar Jackson in training camp at this point. He is going to find a way to wow you every day, but the day-to-day consistency isn't always there. I don't think that's a problem. It's a reflection of the many moving pieces in and out of the offense. But sometimes you do wonder, like, hey, can't you make that pass? Sometimes I see him airmail a ball or throw one out of bounds, and I'm kind of like, I know you are capable of making that pass. And so it's not really fair to hold his feet to the fire in July for not doing it, especially when it matters, he does.
Right. And again, with his track record, I'm not going to read too much into it. Again, Lamar's had some good days. He's had some, by his standards, not so good days, but I think that's just the ebbs and flows of what a training camp can provide. But coming up in the final part of the show, going to get Nikhil's thoughts on some other standouts, some training camp guys that maybe aren't standing out as much as we maybe hoped they would. A lot coming up next on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Now, let's be honest, some days on the course or off of it, you just need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized. And I come from an avid golf family. I've seen my fair share of ridiculous shots, including some wild hole-in-ones, and the boost you get from 5 Hour Energy, it is a game changer. Golf is about good times with good people and good flavors, of course. The grape ginger lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go to without chasing down the bev cart. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that's the number 5hourenergy.com. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONGolf to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. This code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion flavored 5 Hour Energy shots today. Back here on Locked On Ravens with Nikhil Mehta, I am Kevin Oestreicher, diving into Ravens training camp updates and obviously all things Ravens here on the show. Nikhil, just from a general perspective, we've heard about a lot of younger players stepping up in training camp. Tez Walker, obviously someone who wowed during spring practices. He apparently is really taken off recently over the last couple of days. TJ Tampa has had some moments as well. Who are some guys that have really caught your eye over the course of this training camp so far?
Let's see. You mentioned Devonte Walker. I think that's a good place to start because there's actually 3 reps of his I want to describe it in some detail. The first was, I believe, Lamar Jackson's first pass of, it was either Tuesday or Wednesday's practice. Devonte Walker's lined up one-on-one with Jaire Alexander, and Lamar goes right after his buddy, targeting Devonte Walker on a back shoulder ball. Couldn't quite reel it in. But on the first practice of the day, Walker's lined up with Jaire Alexander in a one-on-one contested rep, and Jackson goes right to him. That's the kind of soft leadership I think that Lamar shows in supporting his younger guys. And then I believe it was Wednesday's practice, 2 very early passes from Lamar, a similar deep out routes from Devonte Walker with Chidobe Awuzie in coverage. Lamar threw with a lot of anticipation on the first one, and Walker wasn't ready for it. And then Lamar tried to give him another chance at it. Walker was a little more ready for it, but kind of got caught in the wash with Awuzie, and Awuzie almost made an interception on the ball. So what we're seeing with Walker is that he's developing his route tree. He's working on his chemistry with Lamar, but it is not all there yet. I think he is doing a really good job of some of the little things, being able to contribute when he has short routes. Like short digs or short crossers, short sit routes, just making the catch on those plays. He's not the primary read, but he's making the catch. And I think the other thing I'm seeing him do really well is a lot of times Monken will have a route concept that uses like 3 players on one side of the field and then a backside player is kind of running an individual route. They're just meant to get separation from their one man. And Walker on, I think it was a backside dig, one of those plays where he is just isolated and he just has to get separation so he can be a bailout guy for the quarterback at the end of the play. Get separation, catches the ball on a deep dig. And I think just that some of those smaller steps that we're seeing him take from being really a vertical threat coming out of college. A lot of people, me included, during the draft, thought that was more a question of what he wasn't asked to do as opposed to a question of what he couldn't do. And obviously, his first year in Baltimore, it was going to be a lot of learning. It was going to be learning a lot of special teams. It was going to be run block. That's classic for a day 3 receiver first year in Baltimore. But they really are focused on expanding his route tree. It is going to still be very hard to get him involved in the offense this year, to be quite frank. I think that Tylan Wallace is a guy who deserves snaps, and it's going to be hard to get him involved in the offense. When you think about what happened this offseason, the Ravens got Nelson Agholor moved on, and in came DeAndre Hopkins. He's going to demand more targets than Agholor did. They didn't really lose any running backs, and they added Katon Mitchell. Katon Mitchell's going to need some touches. He's the guy I'm going to get to next. But that's kind of the issue that Walker's facing. Is just the fact that there are he's probably the least proven guy, offensive skill player on the roster, right? And it's just hard for me to commit to giving that guy 50 targets this year when there are so many other good players on the roster. Mitchell's kind of in the same boat. He is going to take, I think he will eat into Derrick Henry's snap share to a certain extent for some of the runs, especially those outside zone runs that Mitchell really excels at. I think the Ravens are bullish on his pass catching, but his pass protection is still a work in progress. He's obviously, the size was always going to be an issue, but really he should have the agility to be able to maneuver and redirect rushers. He's still working on developing that, and Justice Hill is still going to be the guy to protect Lamar Jackson on third down. And so Mitchell's going to still have to focus on carving out a role. Certainly he's likely to be the returner, and I think that is an excellent spot for his speed and his agility. And physically, he does look completely back, by the way. The speed has been there since the spring, but I've really seen his lateral agility, those cuts that he makes between the tackles and in the open field to make defenders miss. That is the element that I was really looking for to be back, and it has been so far this summer.
Quickly, Nikhil, I want to get to kind of the other side of that. Has there been anybody that you have not really been too impressed by, or maybe you were expecting more from, but they haven't really caught your eye as much as you thought?
Yeah, I don't mean to be glib about this, but Leonte Wester was drafted as a returner, and he's not looking great as a returner. He dropped a ball today. Today were some of the first full team punt drills with the ball coming down and a full, I think it was a full 11-on-11 punt drill, and he dropped the ball. And that is just not going to fly in Baltimore. Wallace is reliable. He may not be an explosive punt returner, but the Ravens have talked very clearly on punt returner. They're looking for someone who can make good decisions and catch the ball. I think Wallace's decision-making was lacking a little bit last year, but he catches the ball. With Wester, if he can't catch the ball, how is he going to make this roster? Because he hasn't really stood out as a receiver to me either. He's made some plays. I don't think he's made any more plays than Dayton Wade or Anthony Miller, who to me are his main competition for that wide receiver 6 spot. I don't think he's made more. I think he's probably made fewer plays than them. And so he is a smaller guy who needs to be in a slot role. And that kind of restriction of his ability is just going to make it hard for him to get a roster spot unless he proves himself as their best punt returner in the preseason. So he's one guy I've been a little bit disappointed with. Travis Jones is pegged for a breakout year, and he's not dominating practice the way that you'd think a guy pegged for a breakout year is. Now, I do think part of that is he's getting double teamed as much as he was last year. But I'm hoping to see things tick up from him. One guy I think I just would be remiss not to mention, because the coaching staff, I think, mentions him almost every day, is Tavius Robinson. Robinson has always looked like a beast. He's huge. But the way that every single coach raves about him is really something. And then you have rookie Mike Green asked about which veteran he studies and takes notes from, and he doesn't say Kyle Van Noy, he doesn't say Adefe Owe, he doesn't say Nnamdi Madubuike. He says third year, fourth round pick Tavius Robinson. And I think that is a huge testament to what Tavius Robinson, he does well on the field. He makes a lot of run stops. He had a sack the other day, but to what he is inside that building and what he means to the team. So I just wanted to mention him in there too.
His role, I think, is going to be a lot more important than people are anticipating with him. So I'm excited for Tavius for sure. Nikhil, appreciate you though. I really appreciate you hopping on, giving your insights. I do want to, before you get out of here, I want to have you tell people where they can find you and what you're working on, where they can catch all your updates.
Yeah, first of all, Kevin, thanks so much for having me. Always a pleasure to join you. You can find my written work about the Ravens at russellstreetreport.com. Almost every practice I go to, I'll post some kind of a recap or some kind of an article coming out of it. And you can also come talk ball with me anytime on the social media site known as X, at Nick Knows Ball, although I will be setting up a Blue Sky account here soon.
All right. You can go follow him. You can go check out his work. All the links in the description down below. Nikhil, I appreciate you as always. That's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. We might be back here with some bonus episodes over the weekend. Who knows? The Ravens and their headlines, they love them. So if we have any to talk about, we'll talk about them. But be sure on the way out, hit the like and subscribe button in video form. Follow along in audio form, and I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.